On addressing PCI with Capitalware. I am Chris Hanna with Southwest Airlines. Been in IT for 38 years. Worked with the IBM MQ product as it is currently branded. It's been 7 or 8 other names over that time. For 19 years. Started off in the Marine Corps as a programmer. Worked at USAA in San Antonio, which is my hometown. For 18 years. Did a brief stint with MQ Software, so you may remember a product called QPASA. That was their claim to fame, but I did consulting, training, and pre- and post-sale support for those guys. And then I landed at Southwest Airlines 13 years ago. The best decision I've ever made. If you need to reach me, let me know. Now, Roger, I have a question. Are we doing the ice cream social this year or not?
Yes.
Oh, well, then the good news is you guys are going to be a lot happier after this session getting an ice cream social later in the week than he was after his tutoring session and his ice cream social. So that's good news. Is that tomorrow?
Tonight, or this
tonight.
afternoon.
There we go. Perfect. Perfect timing. So all the ice cream you want on me. Well, sort of. All right, so a little bit about Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines, one of the ways that we managed to remain the low-cost carrier, or one of them now, as you all probably know, there are a lot of people trying to replicate what we do, but we leverage technology heavily. Here's a few technology facts. I'm not going to go through all of them, although we did lead the way in terms of a lot of putting power in the hands of the customers and kiosks and all those kinds of things. All of that's there, and you'll get that in the deck when the time comes. A couple things I do want to talk about. Our customer service reps book about 25%, a little less than 25% of all of our reservations. That's about 1.6 million reservations they book. Total 6.8 million. Those 6.8 million messages represent about 7 MQ PCI messages per transaction. So we do a lot of MQ messages, PCI MQ messaging. We've got another number of other message feeds that we don't address with PCI. We don't have concerns about PCI. A lot of the products that we use from Capitalware, we use in those other environments, not because of the PCI concerns, but just because it's good sense. It's important to us to make sure that our customers' data and our data is protected. Beyond PCI, we do well over 4 million transactions a month in MQ, non-PCI data. PCI and DSS, payment card industry data security standard. Hopefully, if you're here, you understand kind of what that means. And keep PCI compliance, you may find different definitions depending on who you talk to, but based on my research, there's a common set of tenets that make up PCI compliance. The secure network, the protection of the cardholder information wherever it's stored, which is really the key, the protections of the systems and servers, where that data can be stored or may pass through, access control to system information and operation, routine monitoring and testing of the networks to make sure that all that stuff is in place and working. And then you got to have a policy that everybody agrees to and that everybody follows. And you got to be able to look at that and measure that. Why Capitalware? Well, that's an easy one. If you've done much in terms of MQ security, patching, updating, then you know that depending on the version and what year you're in, you can spend a lot of time having to plan and apply patches. And if you do that and you've got your own homegrown solution involving MQ security, then you've got to go and modify that code possibly and test it and regression test it and do all that kind of stuff. And it can become very time consuming very quickly. With the Capitalware solutions, I don't have to worry about that. Roger does all that for me. And all he does is send me a notification, say, hey, you might want to download the next version, and here it is. And they work. The solutions work. They've worked for us from day one, out of the box. They're well documented. I mean, if I can implement it, I promise you anybody in this room, except possibly Jarvis, could implement it. They're easy to maintain. I mean, it's very simple to do an upgrade of all these products, and they all follow the same patterns and the same policies. So once you kind of got one down, it's really very easy to transition from MQME to MQCE to MQ Audit to whatever the case may be. And we get great support. I don't think we ever waited, well, we've never had anything that was a showstopper for us, or anything that was an exposure for us to the point where we felt like we were going to have to stop something, shut something down, or change something because we were at risk or exposed. But when there is an issue, when we do have questions, we never waited, I don't think, 24 hours for a response from Roger, from his organization. And he is timely in updating us proactively about changes, fixes, upgrades, things that we may need to look at. And then cost, for all of us, I'm sure, is a big factor. We couldn't be happier with the pricing that Roger extends, not just us, but really, I mean, out of the box, the price you see is the price you get for everybody, from what I can tell, and it's hard to argue with it. It's just that bottom line, that's that basic. This is a very high level kind of what the flow, the PCI flow for Southwest Airlines looks like. There's more than one business partner that we do receive these types of transactions from today. That may change in the future. And they have these PCI-based payloads that they want to send to us that come across the sender-receiver pair in MQ. Our PCI queue manager puts that data on a PCI queue. There are MQ logs, persistent logs, because this data is important to us, that sit there underneath that every one of those messages get written to. And then we have internal client or clients that connect to those queues and pull that data off. And we'll come back to this later. We'll overlay this with the solutions and where we've applied them. So how do we achieve our PCI goals? Number one, access control. MQ-AUSX is the authentication user exit, and everything from this point forward will be color-coded. You'll see orange for the MQ-AUSX, you'll see red for MQME, which is message encryption, and that means not just the data that's persistent to a queue data store, but also the logs, the log file entries. Anywhere that payload may be written to disk, MQME ensures that it's encrypted. And then we've got an accountability factor, which is where MQ Auditor comes in place. I can configure MQ Auditor and tell it, I want to know what IDs and what type of access, what type of calls are happening against some set of queues. I can give it a mask, or I can call out each queue individually. And then MQCE channel encryption, which the beauty of that for us is everything we do is over private networks with our PCI connections, but we still have that concern and that risk. MQCE takes SSL and cert management and working with all the groups within our organization, as well as the groups in other organizations that have to be involved to do SSL certification, basically, out of the picture. It's all handled by MQCE, and all I have to do is talk to the MQ administrator on the other side and agree that, hey, we're going to turn this on, and boom, off we go. So the way the channels the exits are set up, the MQ-AUSX and the MQCE are channel exits, invoked at channel initialization, and then we've got API, or what I call an entry point exit, MQME and MQA. So those are actually part of a queue manager's INI file, and they get loaded every time the queue manager starts up. MQ USX, a little bit deeper dive. And there's not going to be a lot of technical information here. This is just going to be more about a high level of what these do and how they address the PCI concerns, the PCI tenets that we talked about. If you have technical questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. Unfortunately, we have Mohammed is here, or the mountain is here really, and so we can get the answer straight from the horse's mouth, sort of. But MQ USX lets us fully authenticate a resource, and for us that normally means a robotic application ID, but it can mean users as well, against our LDAP authentication. And more importantly, for us, we can do this for one type of user using one channel against a production LDAP service, which is what we want all of our administrators to have to do in any of our environments. But in non-prod environments, we have robotic applications that in dev need to connect to a dev LDAP server, in iTest to an iTest LDAP server, in QA a QA server, and in each of those environments, all the robotic IDs have the same password to simplify things for them during the development process. So we don't want somebody to be able to go in and connect as an admin and type in my QA password, which is the same as everybody else's, and be, hey, I'm an admin now and I can do anything I want in this queue manager. With the MQ8 implementation of the built-in LDAP or security model that IBM has, they don't have any flexibility to point to more than one authentication source. With MQ USX, we can still maintain that ability to say, hey, admins are all going to go here to get authenticated, but everybody else, all these robotic IDs, we can send them to whatever the source of the service is for that environment, the QA, the iTest, the dev. We can also do some other things that are available now with other products, but we keep it all in one place to simplify it, like limiting the number of channel connections. And then there's just a note here about this little test LDAP SSL that lets us take an INI file that we want to use in a user ID and test the password. You know, if we checked out the password from our CyberArk safe, we can test that really quickly to make sure that our INI file is configured the way we want it to, and that it passes, that everything passes. The way it's invoked or called is via the security data and security exit parameters of the channel. We point it to an INI file that says, for this channel, use these parameters, and then we point it to the exit itself, which is typically bar MQM exits. In our environment, we use some different paths, but something else that I want to call out to any junior hackers like Eric von Koschenbar there, any paths that you see in here, any usernames, any robotic names, INI files, all that's been changed to protect the innocent, or at least me. I don't know how innocent I am, but so you can't go back and try to connect to Southwest Airlines and use any of this data. It won't do you any good. None of the paths are real. I went and changed everything and went through a couple sessions with my boss to make sure that I got it all. They tested me thoroughly. So you've got your security details, and then you've got the actual code, and you got, more importantly, logs of every attempt, successful or not, which can also be an important part of your PCI audit, because we include that stuff, snapshots of that stuff, in our audit, so that we can show those auditors that it's working, how it works, and you know, that we do know if something didn't work, or if somebody's in there going at it over and over again and failing. You know, that's a good thing to know probably for a PCI environment. I'm going to show you a couple of sample from our environment LDAP or INI files. This one is the one that really applies to PCI because it's doing SSL authentication. It's saying, hey, does this guy pass an SSL or an LDAP, I'm sorry, authentication? So we're saying use LDAP. Well, we're saying debug mode because at this point we want to know if there's any issues. We want all the information we can have so that we can send it to Roger and he can tell us why it's not working, what we've done wrong, or what's broken in his code. We tell it we definitely want to use the LDAP. We give it the LDAP server specifics. We're using SSL for that LDAP connection. Does it require a cert? Well, I hope so. And then what kind of cert and where's that located? Are we going to allow, are we going to do use allow user ID? In other words, do we want to say if he comes in and he passes LDAP, let's let him go, or do we want to say if he comes in, passes LDAP and he's in my list, which is something that we do, then we'll let him go. And then in a lot of cases we'll also say, hey, he also has to be on my list of expected user or IP addresses. And that's something that we leverage as well in most of our, well, in a number of our environments. So not only do they have to do the LDAP thing, but then they have to pass just a little bit more so that we can have a better feeling that these are the people this is somebody that we're expecting that we want in this environment. And then that other stuff, well documented, you can look in the documentation, ask Roger, he'll give you a copy of it, I'm sure. Actually, let me go back to that. Yeah, so, and we do have environments where we have legacy apps that can't do LDAP authentication. They're not set up. Third-party apps, sometimes just legacy apps that for one reason or another, they can't go in and they cannot provide us that LDAP information, that they can't present us credentials. And in that case, we definitely use these additional parameters to try to give us a warm fuzzy. It's not PCI compliant. If anything, PCI does not fall in this category, but we use this for other MQ-related applications, and these are things that help us have a better feeling that, hey, these people are who we think they are, and they should be accessing our environment. Message encryption. Data at rest. For us, that means all the PCI data, whether it's sitting in the queue or whether it's sitting in a log file somewhere, is encrypted. And that's important because when it comes into us now, thanks to MQCE, we don't have to worry about it on the wire because it's encrypted. It used to be it would land on that queue, and until we had this in place, it was exposed. I mean, if somebody had access to that file share, that data share, then they could, in theory, see the data and see the payload. Wouldn't be something they could just, read right off the top of their head probably, but it's there. With the message encryption, we don't have to worry about that. And we do pick that data up once it comes in, and we apply a token to it. So we do due diligence at that point and tokenize it, but it's still important to know that before we got to that point, it was protected and it was covered. It's deployed as an exit, as in the bar queue of exits or exit 64 path, and it is also managed via an INI file. So you decide what you want to do with the product, and you set it up in an INI file, and you point the product to the INI file. So there in red, you'll see we've got our stanza for MQME. We call out the module, and then we say use dtpc.ini to figure out what to do with MQME. Yes, sir.
Does the encryption with this product occur at the application side, the client side, or is it at the queue manager once it comes into the queue manager?
Well, what happens is, for most of these products, the client has a jar file, in our case, that they call, and then that agreement takes place based on what that client picks up in that jar file. But you can tell it what level of encryption, you can tell it, you know, pretty much anything you would need to about how to do that. So
If the application's connecting remotely, then MQME runs in the key manager address space. So in their case, that's why they need the channel encryption, because it's flowing across in plain text. So and QCE will encrypt the channel data as it comes across. If the application connects locally in binding mode, then MQME actually runs in the application's address space. So it's encrypted as when the application does the put. The encryption happens right then and there. Then that encrypted data is handed to the queue manager and stored in the queue file, log file.
Okay. So does that then make it easier, where I don't necessarily have to manage the certificates at the application? If I don't need full end-to-end encryption like what AMS provides?
Like I said, if it depends on your thing. If you're just looking for end-to-end, in other words, on the fly, then you want to listen to the part about MQCE, in other words, channel encryption, because then you take out certificates. So that's from point A to point B on the fly, right? So but if you want it at rest, that's where MQME comes into play. Now there's a second way MQME can work. If you deploy it, if you're using MQME in a clustered environment, and I have several customers who do, you can, anywhere you're in the clustering environment, you drop down MQME. In the next foil, he'll show you how to, or actually it's that one, where you designate your protected queues. If you designate them, the ones that are local, but not the clustered name ones, then MQME will encrypt it, and it will flow through the cluster encrypted. So you don't need MQCE, but you have to have MQME everywhere the cluster exists, right? So it's 2 of 1, 3 of the other. Do you want to do on the fly and then drop it, or are you willing to do all your 25, 30 queue managers with MQME and then have all the messages flow in there, and then you're doing one definition per queue manager for the MQME, and it will take care of the rest, because every time it touches it for a cluster, it shoots it off encrypted, right? It says, oh, it doesn't belong here, it belongs over there, and it's gone. But it encrypts it locally, and then from that point on, it's treated at rest, but because of the way the cluster, IBM designed the cluster, it will flow on the cluster transmit queue, and out it goes and lands on the other side. But the other side will need to have MQME. But that's, you can come talk to me later on.
Sure.
That's kind of getting way outside his thing.
One other question on this. If we have a message that's encrypted by MQME on a queue, if you were to use the MQS BCG, would that show up in display format?
MQME is only for on the fly. So application does a put while it's traveling in the air. It's encrypted. When it gets to the other side, as like the MCA would do a put to the local queue, it's decrypted. So it never lands. It never shows up in a queue as encrypted. Okay. With MQCE. It's just from point A. It's in the air from point A to point B.
But once it's on the queue with MQME, did you do MQS BCG and show up?
No. If you do so the MQME, let's say you've got a protected queue up there. I can't read it, but let's say you're putting let's say we're using that ini file, and you're going to put to something called test.q, right? Which is not in the list. I mean, let's say it was in the list up there, and it's protected. So when it comes across, MQME would encrypt the data, it lands in the queue. So then whatever user IDs up there are set for getting or putting. So if you're not in the list for getting and you use MQ, like any tool, it will reject you if your user ID is not in the list. It'll just come. There's 2 layers of authorization. There's MQ's authorization and then MQME's authorization. So
I've used MQ Explorer with a user ID that wasn't in that authorized list, and it'll let me look at a message, but it'll give me an error, a warning, and I can't see the data. It's garbage. What I can see is garbage. So you gotta pass, you gotta be an authorized user for that queue, and then when you access it, MQME says, okay, yeah, this guy is in my list. Here you go. Here's what your data looks like. It's decrypted for you. So, but as long as it's sitting on that queue and you're not authorized, you're not in the list, then it's it's your eyes only kind of a thing. So, okay. So, as Roger's kind of already pointed out, I'm just giving it the cues that I want to provide encryption on, and the list of user IDs that have the ability to access that encrypted data. Okay, number 3, MQ Auditor. MQ Auditor is not providing any security. It's providing me peace of mind, and it's providing me an audit record that I can get back to a PCI auditor that says, hey, we know who's been accessing our data and how they're accessing the data, what IDs and what kind of calls those guys are making. And I can do that for any specific message in any queue if I know what time of day I'm looking for or what time and days I want to look at. So it's it audit tracks the API calls. I can tell exactly what calls I want. I can also tell it, hey, if there was a call and it got this return code, 2033, hey, no message on the queue. I don't want to worry about that. Don't bother logging that. And it's deployed in the exits or exit64. It uses an INI file. You'll see the common theme here. You know, use an INI file to tell me what to do, what MQ Auditor needs to do whenever it gets invoked. And then you can set up a path where you want those audit files located. And for us, that means we provide a path, and then we have other jobs that are run by other teams. They go in and collect that data on a regular basis, be it nightly or weekly, and they move that to a PCI sensitive repository so that when we do our PCI exercises, they know where that data's at, and it's all in one place, and we know where to go and what to look for.
Are those calls that you called out there just the ones you chose? Or
Yeah, those are just the ones I click. You can choose any call you want, any API call that you want. This is kind of what we were using at one time.
And when MQME and MQ Auditor are stacked, does MQME do its job first, so Auditor is not getting plain text data?
You can set the order, and if you go back 3
That's how you
foils,
chain your exits.
you can chain your exits, so you put them in the order you want. You can set it 1,
Yeah.
2, or 2, 1, whatever.
Yeah, which is why I had MQME first and Auditor second.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Oh, actually, I have Auditor first. That's a good call. So yeah, really, I should put MQME first in my list there. Monitor type, do I want to monitor this after the call or before the call? Or after the call or before and after, only 2 choices. Part of that audit record gives you the ability to display message data, and the default is 25 characters, and that's what we use. But I can say, hey, I want to make sure that that's displayed as text, just because in the first 25 bytes of my data, there's never going to be any credit card information anyway. But that just makes it just that little bit tougher for somebody to just look at it and clearly read, hey, that's what that says. That's what that part of that payload says. And all the other things we talked about, the queues, the calls, you know, where do we want the data stored, the actual audit files archived to. And this is a sample entry taken from one of my files. And I can tell what call, I can tell what time of day, what user ID made that call, you know, the queue that it was made against, when was that data put, that this get was done for, when was that data put originally, and then this is that little header bit I was telling you about, or payload bit that I was telling you about. I got 25 characters. I look at that, it's a bunch of numbers. I could probably go and pull up whatever tool I needed and figure it out, but it just says, hey, I got carried away. Then QCE, which is the final piece of the puzzle, and something that we recently added. And for us, as I said, the biggest reason that we did that was because it simplifies. We know we're on a private dedicated circuit, so That gives us some peace of mind, but it just simplifies everything involved in getting certs and managing certs, especially with another partner or vendor, because all of that is handled under the covers by QCE. All we have to do is agree on the exit, install it on both sides, set up the I&I file that we want that exit to follow, and then start the channels. We can tell it what key size we want to use. Hey, 256 bigger is better, right? That's what we use. May or may not be the case for you guys. Do we want to assign it? Do we want to encrypt it? Or do we want to do both? In my case, we're just encrypting. Do we want to debug? I always start with debug, yes, because I don't always use things the way Roger intended them, and that way he can easily tell me what I did wrong.
That should be lock mode equals N. I don't know what D equals Y. That's a typo.
That's what I got in my, no, debug equal yes. That's what your documentation says. That's what I'm running in my, it didn't tell me there was an error.
I just ignored it.
Oh,
It treated it
Okay.
as fluff.
all right. Well, I wish you would have noticed that before I started the presentation so I could change it. So I think your documentation's off,
Okay.
because I did that per the sample documentation. So, yes, sir.
One quick question on the MQCE. That can be used with client channels as well?
Yeah, that's what it's designed for client channels, but it can be do for queue manager too.
And does it eliminate the need for like the client to maintain a SSL repository?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So basically.
So basically, this is a competitor to SSL.
Yeah.
So there's no expiry of certs. You don't have to do the yearly management, any of that. This is you go one or the other.
It greatly simplifies your life as a MQ channel administrator.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. All right, so let's bring it back to PCI now. We talked about the 6 tenets. Secure network, MQCE solves that for us. Protection of the card holder information wherever it's stored, MQE solves that for us. And you could argue that in some of these cases, more than one product, because the network's not really being stored in the network, but it's kind of, being stored on the network for some short period of time. Protections of the servers, systems and servers, MQCE and MQ-AUSX. MQ Auditor doesn't protect those systems, but it gives us peace of mind and the ability to go back and track that it's been protected, that those systems are being protected. Access control, clearly MQ-AUSX, and again, MQCE, I mean, that's kind of access control. It's preventing somebody from just grabbing that thing off the wire and going, hey, there's a credit card number. Routine monitoring and testing, that's clearly where MQ Auditor falls. And then MQ Auditor helps you also ensure that you've got that formal security policy. And then log files from all of these. I could have put log files from all of these in 5 and 6 because those are something we use in every one of our PCI audits. The document that we submit includes sample entries, live entries of the log files from all of these products. MQ-AUSX, MQCE, MQME, because that helps our auditor understand what's happening and see that there's really stuff taking place there, that there's really activity that's being captured and being looked at. And then we also have, as I hope all of you do, we have a monitoring and management solution. And that provides us logs. That provides us the ability to report, to do reports of who has gone through that tool and touched any of these systems. So that gives us another layer. So that's also something you should look at if you're thinking about PCI and PCI compliance and a PCI audit. Look at all of those tools and all of those things that you've got and leverage those logs, leverage those report capabilities. And then we come back, and this gives you that picture that we had before, but I've overlaid it with that color-coded set of product offerings so that you can see where we've actually applied it and how we've applied it in our environment. Now we've got the PCI data running across that encrypted channel. We've got the MQME taking care of those logs and that data at rest on the queue. We've got MQAUSX on that server connection so that when that client went to get that data, he had to authenticate. And then we've got the MQCE logs. This is what I was talking about a minute ago. All the logs from those products, as well as MQ Auditor, as well as all the reports and logs from our management and monitoring solution. And that takes care of our routine monitoring, testing, and verification of our security policy. You want more information? He's right there. Grab him before he gets out the door. Go out to the website. You can get sample downloads of all of this stuff, trial downloads. It's easy to do business with Capitalware. That's one of the things we love about them. It's easy to get the solutions and get them installed, beta test them. I've beta tested stuff for 90 days before because I started and then I got distracted on this and then I had to go back and I call Roger and say, hey, I'm going to try and get this trial going again. Sure, here's another key. Easy to do business with Roger. Any questions? Yes, sir.
So are these all sold as a suite or individually or both?
Both.
You can get them as a suite, but in our case, we kind of pieced them together. And a good story. We were running. We were looking for something in one of our initial 2009 or 2010 audits, and we were saying, we really need to do something in terms of user authentication. And we found MQAUSX. Great. I sat down with my boss at the time and we looked at it, we trialed it, yeah, it was working, so we started putting it in. And we were talking about it and my boss says, well, this LaCroix guy, maybe we could get him to do, maybe we could contract him to do MQ, like message encryption, because back when I was supporting MQ software, there were a couple of companies that offered MQ message encryption of data at rest products, and those have since fallen by the wayside. I went out and looked for MQ Armor out of South Africa. There was also a company in France that I can't remember the name of, but I did a search to see, let me find a user authentication or a message encryption exit. I know there was, commercial code for that at one time. Couldn't find it. Those companies had gone by the wayside. So we called Roger up and we said, hey, would you be interested in writing this message encryption exit for us? Well, no, I'm really busy, and I got some other stuff going, and no, thank you, I really appreciate it, but I'm not really interested. So about 6 weeks later, I get a call, Roger LaCroix. Hey, Roger, how's it going? Well, Chris, I've got this thing that I think you might want to beta test. Oh yeah, what is it? It's message encryption, data at rest. And I was like, yeah, great, send it my way. And so I don't think I'm the reason that he wrote MQME, but I think that he had, probably more than one customer saying, hey, we really would love to, our PCI auditors on us, it would make our lives a lot simpler if we had message encryption, for the data at rest. And, he's a smart guy. He jumped on it. So, yes, sir.
When MQME starts encrypting, it leaves the MQMD header alone.
Yep.
Any chained headers in the body are encrypted though, like RFH2 headers?
Yep.
And when MQME and MQCE are talking to each other, does MQCE unencrypt it and then MQME immediately recrypts it, or can they hand off?
The default is that question, yes. There's a partner keyword that you can say partner, and then one will release, not decrypt it, it will pass it.
It'll avoid that.
So it'll avoid, yeah.
Thanks.
But all the encryption keys, algorithms, everything are the same.
Yeah, they all will use AES.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So, to get on the MQME, what controls who can decrypt the message? Is that by user ID or?
Actually,
For
let me rephrase
MQME?
that. There's 3 levels.
Yeah.
There's 3 levels. You can control it as a filter by application name. So that's by filter. And then within, like, that's kind of like at a higher level. And then within specifics of the authorization, you can control it by groups. So you can say, here's groups. If your user ID is not in that group, you don't get in. Or you can control it explicitly by user IDs. So you can give it a list, or one user ID or two user IDs, whatever you want. And so you control it that way. So your choice of kind of how granular, how down you want to go. So if you like managing by groups, you can set the groups up and go that way.
One of the reasons I'm asking is, look at AMS a little bit, and compare this to that. One of the issues is, so encrypted data that has to be picked up by message broker flow and so on, and then because it's a user ID, so like every flow on that broker all runs under the same ID, so essentially they all have access to the encrypted.
Right.
We figured out a way to get that down to an execution group. So at least only the things within that execution group can do that. I was just kind of wondering if MQB provided a different way.
Those are the ways right now. I mean, if you could run your execution, like your broker under a different application name that shows up, in the put application name, then you can control it from a higher level that way, or else,
Data flow engine.
Yeah. You can always test it. Like I don't play with brokers, so like without, if you don't want to try it out, test it. The one big difference between two big differences between AMS and MQME. One is don't use SSL, so there's none of that part. Two is that the difference in MQ administrator. Now an MQ administrator runs, let's say, normally under MQM, right? You're God. When it comes to a queue manager, you're God. You could do whatever you want. AMS says, if you go in with MQ Explorer and you're MQM user, if you're not, as AMS, if you're not in the privileged group, it will hand back the encrypted data, right, to the user. So the user can take that and say, cut, paste, now put it in some engine on the internet and decrypt it for me, right? And depending on the key size, that may take 1 minute, or it may take 1 hour, or depending on the key size, 2 years, right? With my product, if your user ID, if the MQM is not explicitly put in that group of user IDs or explicitly set as a user ID, you don't get permission. It just comes back and says 2009, 2109. You don't get to see the data, encrypted data at all. You just get, give me the hand. That's it. So if you do the proper, and I was on a conference call Friday with another company, and I was trying to explain the separation of roles. I was actually talking to the security team. The MQ guy was sitting in the background quietly because he wanted me to talk to the security team. So and this is what I tell the people, you do a separation of roles of the MQ guy sets up the exit, the data, all the parameters for MQM, you set it up. The person that edits the MQME ini file is a security team, and they have their thing, they have write permission to that file. Whoever needs, from a permission point of view, they can have read permission because MQME, whatever address space runs in, going to need to read permission of that, but you don't have write permission. So somebody can go in and edit the user IDs and alter it. So the MQ admin should never have, write permissions to the MQME ini file. That way you can separate them out and say, nah, we don't want the MQ admins looking at the data. Sorry, but you can't. And if you want to do that real separation, and that's what I was explaining to them, how to do the separation of roles, so that way MQ administrators do their things, security groups do their things, and MQ admins, like when you're worried about like real customer data, if you want to go down that extreme path, and that's the path they want to go down, if the MQ administrators can't see credit card data, they can't have that privilege, then that's how you do it, and MQ will handle it. And so, but AMS, the administrator will always get the encrypted data back if they don't have the policy or the cert for it, right? So that's the fundamental difference. I don't believe that you should ever, if you want to protect your system, you should never be able to see the encrypted data, right? Because you can always screen grab it and put it on an engine on the internet and let it bang at it for hours, and you just pay whatever web server you're running or whatever farm, and it'll crack it, right? So it's your choice. How extreme do you want to go? How privileged do you think you need to be, and all that stuff? It's a choice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's no reason your MQ admin should ever need to look at a credit card.
That's the
Payload.
primary reason to encrypt the.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question. Can you speak to the performance of the encryption overhead? You said you're doing a lot of messages per day.
We've never had a need to try to measure it because it's never been an issue. It's never been anything that's impacted us. We don't see any delay or any measurable, perceivable slowdown in the data, in terms of the data throughput. So.
Is there any benefit with using the Capitalware product over AMS in terms of performance?
A lot cheaper for us, a lot cheaper. And it gives us flexibility, as I said, especially in our environment where we have, in non-prod environments, we have robotic IDs and all the users, quite frankly, that have a common password. Simplifies the things for our security guys, and it simplifies the development work for those developers and those robotic IDs. But we don't want people to go in and authenticate as an admin and be able to use that common password. That means Eric von Kostenberg can come in and log in, if he knows my ID and that common password, and he's an administrator. And he can do whatever he wants there, and in theory, he can do things in other environments to make it easier for him to get into those environments. So for us, we don't want to have a single LDAP source of authentication. We can't do that with the IBM implementation as it currently stands. And from what IBM has told me for the last 2 years, that's the way it's going to be. That's their model moving forward. So with MQ AUSX, we have that flexibility. We have that ability to say, hey, for you people using this channel, authenticate this way against this set of servers. And for anybody that comes in on these admin channels, guess what? You got to go do real production authentication. So, yes, sir.
For third-party integration, what are the considerations of where to use your product? Like, are there any things that the third-party teams need to implement on their side coming into our data center?
Depends on which product, like which.
I'm not really familiar with the product itself.
Well, okay, well, tell me the scenario.
The encryption piece of it, right? So I have a third-party vendor sending me data, and I want to encrypt the data coming into the data center.
Right.
What do they need to do? Because I am encrypted within the data center, all the flows are all encrypted at rest and then in flight. So what are the things that we may need to be reaching out to them and change their model?
Yeah, so from Capitalware's point of view, you're going to be looking at MQCE, so channel encryption. So basically, you deploy the channel X at both ends.
Yep.
So
we went through that with Amadeus, and basically we said, hey, here's the code, the exit code, and you got to put it in an exit path that you can reach, that your queue manager can reach, so that it can be in that channel definition. And then these are the parameters that we're going to use in that INI file. And we purchased licenses, and we said, these are yours, these are ours, because you got to apply a license. And then we did a little testing, said it looks great. We moved it from those test channels to the channels that are actually sending the PCI data in a non-prod environment, and we turned them on. We said, okay, X is in place here, X is in place here, restart the channels, and didn't miss a beat. Now with some of the other things like MQ AUSX, those clients have to have there's a jar file or a DLL, depending on what environment, what kind of code. There's a file that they will have, and some calls they will have to include to say, hey, MQ AUSX is going to be a part of what I'm doing. And that requires that they send a certain set of parameters. They've got to present credentials. And so there's a little bit of coding change, and that was external and internal. Our customers had to go in and make some, or as they were writing the code, include those calls and point to those executables, those DLLs or those jar files. And then, in terms of impact to them, it was nothing that anybody ever complained too much about, and it wasn't anything that was onerous for them. They do. I mean, both ends, all parties involved do have to play their role, and they do have to take some action. But I would not characterize it as an onerous thing by any means. And as far as MQCE with Amadeus, they were thrilled to not have to go through the whole SSL cert management stuff with us. That was, and they were familiar with Roger, with Capitalware, which helped, and they were just like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds like a good plan. And we did a brief POC and bang.
Now, if your applications, like I was saying, are coming on client channels, if your applications that are outside already are set up with an MQ JNDI or the client channel definition table, then you just update those things to say, oh, here's the exits, and you're done. There's no application changes. You just update those files that are external to the application, and you're done. You put them in, put the file, like the DLL or Java file, wherever that it's accessible, and you're done. There's no application changes. It's seamless. They just run a test and go, oh, it worked, good.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, actually, I forgot about that with our J, because we do have a lot of MQJ and DI based applications, and that's exactly what we did. And we set up a template that included the Capitalware executable path, the path to the code, and yeah, it's that easy.
So I'm assuming these tools have to be installed on the box where your queue manager is running. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Yeah, that's the var MQM exits or var MQEX exit or whatever path.
okay, so that sounds like no support yet for the appliance.
No, the appliance
Well,
doesn't allow
And
external
if
coding.
you, yeah, if you remember, that's what the guy said. They don't allow you to apply exits. They aren't set up and prepared to say, yeah, you can install third-party products here.
Okay,
Now,
so
if you'd like to help me,
Yeah.
I have for a year now, I've been bugging IBM to set up a app store for their appliance,
okay.
right? And I've been pushing hard. Why can't we have an app store for the appliance? I will, in whatever vendor, we give you the code, you put it on, and then the person at the other end says, oh yeah, I want either Nastel or Capitalware or whatever. Click it, the app store pulls it down from their approved data, whatever, wherever they're storing it, and I've been bugging them. They get a pushback, they go, well, we haven't had any customers request that. So if you would like to help the ball keep going, ask them about an app store for the appliance, because the more they hear it from somebody other than me, the greater chances that they'll implement it. Because I don't say, let me deploy it. I keep saying, oh, well, let's put it in an app store. You control it. I give it to you, and then you control it, like just the way Apple does, right? So I'm trying to put it in their ball, like put it in something that they can control, since the appliance is all about control.
Roger, put together an RFE, put it to all your customers and the listserv, and I bet you'll get
Yeah,
over 100 votes, just
Yeah.
like that. So I know that's what they would tell you,
yeah,
but
yeah.
your customers would vote for that,
Yeah.
so.
I agree. All right, well, that's all I had. Thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, I'll be here.